Hey guys, it's Bionic here. Today I'll be updating the rankings of all the legendary heroes in the minigame using the new information from the website. The rankings will now also include each hero's awakenings. I will give each awakening a score out of 2 for a total of 6 maximum additional points, which I will then add on top of the other categories I ranked previously in the hero ranking videos. I will also adjust these previous scores based on adjustments made to heroes since then. I am only giving awakenings a total out of 6 because they don't come with the hero and are a very heavy investment to achieve. Otherwise, they are powerful enough to be worth 15 to 20 points. And before I start, I must mention that Quetzalcoatl is no longer my top pick, or even in contention for my top 5 anymore. Finally, before we start, I'll remind everyone that all of these heroes' kits are subject to change. Let's start in alphabetical order, with Anu first. All of his abilities have stayed the same, but awakenings have been added. For his awakening 1, I'll give it 1 out of 2. Blocking disables for 2 turns is decent. For his awakening 3, converting the heal of 30% of damage to shield has the potential to be very strong once your slayers are hitting hard, and more so when there are multiple targets for a hero like Sizen with his AoE basic. 1.5 out of 2 points. His awakening 5 is very strong. Stopping enemies from critical hitting is great. 2 out of 2 points. Overall, he gets 23 out of 36 stars. Next, we have Anubis. The only thing that changed on his kit was his passive, reducing from 30 to 20%. I'll dock his previous score 1 point for this. His awakening 1 is core cooldown reduction, which is always good. 1.5 out of 2 points. Stealing 20% divinity from all enemies after defeating an enemy is also rather good. 1.5 out of 2 points. The awakening 5 is decent. It is niche and the divinity gain relative to his divinity cost is not that good. 1 out of 2 points. Anubis gets a total of 22 out of 36 points. Apollo's kit remained the same, with some inconsequential damage multiplier changes. His awakening 1 removed the need for him to have accuracy to place acid on his basic, which is decent. 1 out of 2 points. His awakening 3 could be very good along with his passive in long fights like Clan Boss. I like how it synergizes with his kit. 1.5 out of 2 points. A 15% ignore defense every second turn for an ally that cannot be selected is okay, but not great for an awakening 5. 1 out of 2. Apollo gets a total of 26 out of 36 points. Next we have Ares, who also had some minor change to his attack multipliers, almost enough to dock himself a point. Otherwise his awakening 1 is lackluster, giving 10% turn meter for defeating an enemy. Half a point out of 2. His awakening 3 blocks revive when his ultimate defeats an enemy, which is a single target ability. This is different to banish, as it's likely permanent compared to banish, which is a debuff that expires or can be removed. It's rather strong in niche circumstances. Considering his poor divinity generator, I can't give it more than 1 out of 2 points. His awakening 5 is a decent damage multiplier. Quite good for arena and decent for other content. 1.5 out of 2 points. Ares gets a total of 25.5 out of 36. Next we have Athena, who had a big change to her passive. Now it only applies to herself rather than the whole team. This is a significant nerf for her in all areas of the game. For this I have reduced her score in arena and clan boss by 0.5 of a point and waves and bosses by 1 point, for a total reduction of 3 points. On the other hand, her awakenings look quite strong. Res up 2 on the awakening 1 is good, especially after seeing the amount of debuffs the clan boss puts out. 1.5 out of 2. Her awakening 3 is crazy strong. It places petrify on any enemies that attack any shield. 2 out of 2 points. The awakening 5 is fairly insignificant, as it boosts Athena's ultimate damage, which has a low multiplier to start off with. Even if all of your allies were hit 30 times before her ultimate, she would still hit less than many slayers. half a point out of 2. Athena gets a total of 23 out of 36 points. Now we have Sizen. My current hero I have locked in the minigame. All of his skills are unchanged. His Awakening 1 activates Blaze without reducing its cooldown when the target is under acid. This is good value for Awakening 1, especially if you have an ally attack hero or Wukong imprint. 1.5 out of 2 points. His Awakening 3 changes precision from single target to team wide. This is also good, although it's a 1 turn buff. I'll give it 1 out of 2 points. The Awakening 5 has a 50% chance to extend acid and blaze by 1 turn when they are damaged by acid. This is also very strong. I'll give it 1.5 out of 2 points. Sizen gets a total of 27.5 out of 36. Next we have Dracula. He had a significant change to his ultimate HP damage multiplier, going from 4 times 3% to 4 times 4%, or more simply a change from 12 to 16%. For this I'll give his previous score 2 extra points. His Awakening 1 changes single target bleed placement to all enemies, which synergizes really well with his ultimate, likely making it possible to get huge damage multipliers on his ultimate in the right types of boss encounters and occasionally against tanky waves. I like it and score it 2 out of 2. The Awakening 3 destroys enemy max HP up to 60%. I do not like this, and if it reduces dot damage and percent max HP damage, then it's worse again. There must be a use for it though, so I'll be merciful and give it half a point out of 2. The Awakening 5 steals 5% of allies' HP on their turn and gives Dracula 2% divinity. I'm not a fan of this ability either, as Drac is probably the tankiest person on the team already, and 2% divinity per ally is lucky to be a total of 10% divinity per turn for Dracula. Half a point out of 2. Dracula gets a total of 21 out of 36. Freya also had some changes to her damage multipliers, which are inconsequential. Other than that, her kit has remained stable. Although I'm not really a huge fan of her awakenings. I was hoping they would play into her damage amplification a bit more. Her Awakening 1 gives an additional men for 2 turns only if the ally is below 50% HP. This doesn't really excite me. I'll be generous and give it 1 out of 2 points. The Awakening 3 places Phoenix on all allies below 50% HP for 2 turns. This could be quite good, 1 out of 2 points. The Awakening 5 is a decent damage boost to all allies' damage. Although people must realize that 1200% of initiative is a very low number. Even with crazy high initiative of 300, it will only do 3600 extra damage before damage reductions are considered. To make proper use of this, you would likely need heroes with crazy multi-hitting abilities like Wukong's ultimate. With his 8 hitter, this could yield an extra 29k damage per ultimate, which might equate to about 30% more damage, as he should be probably hitting 100k or more damage with his ultimate by the time you manage to get 300 initiative on any hero. Plus, if you take into consideration Freya's built-in damage multiplication, then you might be hitting more like 200 or 300k per hit. Otherwise, it's more like 5% extra damage on single hitting abilities. I'll again give it 1 out of 2 points, as it has some decent potential. Freya gets a total of 28.5 out of 36. Next we have Fujin, whose kit has not been altered at all. His awakenings are likely mixed up. I would assume that this Awakening 5 is the Awakening 1 and vice versa, as they would affect the correct ability and also make more sense. So the Awakening 1 gives allies who are under the Protect buff a tiny barrier when attacked by an AoE attack. It's not particularly significant, but it is needed to allow his ultimate to increase a barrier. I'll give it 1 out of 2 points. The Awakening 3 is pretty cool. It reflects 25% of the reduced damage from his passive, which works out to be 7.5% per target hit, which is quite strong. But if Raijin is on the team, it reflects all of the reduced damage, which is 30% from each ally. So if someone hits your team for a 50k AoE hit, this will reflect 60k damage back to that hero. I'll give it 1.5 out of 2 points. His Awakening 5 is very strong. It causes his ultimate to transfer all debuffs from allies onto himself. Then all these debuffs are then transferred onto the target. This will now allow a large barrier increase with his ultimate. It also increases Raijin's turn meter by 20% for each debuff transferred, which is also rather good. I like this awakening. Fujin needs it to be really good. 2 out of 2 points. Fujin gets a total of 22 out of 36. Grendel's kit has also stayed the same. His Awakening 1 is a bit weird. It places initiative down 2 on enemies already under despair. But the only way for him to apply despair is with his core, and it's only a 1-turn despair. It's going to be very hard to make use of this. Plus, initiative down is unlikely worth the hassle. I'll give it half a point out of 2. The Awakening 3 looks like an interesting one. It adds an additional effect to his passive, which already increases his speed and initiative by 5% for every 10% HP missing. It also increases turn meter and divinity increase effects by 5%. This has the potential to be fairly strong, but I imagine it will be very difficult to use and practice. 1 out of 2 points. The Awakening 5 is quite strong. It changes the instant kill condition from below 20% HP to below 30% HP, as well as guarantees a strong hit when Grendel's HP is below 50%. I'll be generous and give it 1.5 out of 2 points. Grendel gets a total of 22.5 out of 36. Now onto Hades, who has no changes to his kit either. His Awakening 1 stops him from weak hitting enemies that are under curse, which is really good for use in the arena and boss fights to guarantee the placement of his Despair or Lock ultimate against his weak affinity matchups. I'll be generous and give it 1.5 out of 2 points. His Awakening 3 has an 80% chance of increasing the cooldown of an enemy's core ability by 2 turns, which is very strong, but it's only single target. 1 out of 2 points. His Awakening 5 places one of these 4 debuffs on targets under curse. I don't really like these random buff abilities. Plus it also requires Curse 2 to be on the enemies. Half a point out of 2. Hades gets a total of 24.5 out of 36. Heimdall, on the other hand, has had a few small changes. He now does not activate bleed anymore, which may be a good thing as it might have removed the bleed stacks. It's hard to know. It now additionally activates Aetherburn. He also had his Awakening 3 nerfed from placing ward for 4 turns, now down to 2 turns. Overall, these changes do not make a difference to the previous score I gave Heimdall, as it did not include Awakenings to start off with. His Awakening 1 gives him 3% HP for each debuff reflected by his passive, which is great to keep him alive, as he will be taking a lot of damage from Protect and Intercept. Great synergy for his kit, 2 out of 2 points. His Awakening 3 places ward for 2 turns. Previously this was 4, which was very strong. Probably too strong. For this Awakening, I'll give it 1 out of 2 points. His Awakening 5 activates his ultimate before any turn is taken. This is extremely strong in wave type content and short boss fights. In long boss fights and clan boss, it's not really doing much. 1.5 out of 2 points. Heimdall gets a score of 31.5 out of 36. Next we have Hel, who has had a change to her divinity cost, which has increased from 1,200 to 1,600. Plus her starting divinity is slightly lower. This is painful to see as her divinity generator is very poor. Due to this, I'll drop her score slightly from 21 out of 30 to 20 out of 30. Her Awakening 1 significantly improves her passive by adding in increased divinity fill effects, as well as making it persist across waves. 2 out of 2 points. Her Awakening 3 causes her shades to deal 50% more damage. This sounds good, but since it can't be used on bosses or minions, it has much less use. 1 out of 2 points. Awakening 5 gives a 50% chance to block revive, which is increased by 25% for each shade in the battle. If this stops shade from working, then it's almost more of a negative than a positive. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt, 1 out of 2 points. Hel gets a total of 24 out of 36 points. Now on to Hercules, whose abilities have not been changed. His Awakening 1 gives him a 20% barrier after his passive triggers. It's okay, but not game changing. 1 out of 2 points. His Awakening 3 reduces the target's attack by 5%, stacking up to 5 times when they're under acid. I think this damage reduction effect is very valuable. 2 out of 2 points. The Awakening 5 increases this hero's attack by 5% up to 60%, stacking up to 12 times. This is not that strong as Hercules only has a 140% attack multiplier to work off. 1 out of 2 points. Hercules gets a total of 25 out of 36. Isis seems to have had one nerf to her basic. It now starts at 35% chance to steal a buff instead of 50. I will deduct 1 point from her previous score. Her Awakening 1 removes the need to build accuracy on Isis. This is pretty good, 1.5 out of 2. Her Awakening 3 places Mend on all allies for 3 turns. This can be very powerful, 1.5 out of 2 points. Her Awakening 5 places Immortal on all allies for 2 turns after reviving them. This will have some use cases, potentially she could be part of an unkillable boss team. 1.5 out of 2 points. Isis gets a total of 24.5 out of 36 points. Next we have Lamashtu, who had huge changes to her kit. She now hits much harder on her core and ultimate, which she really needed. She did lose her self buff attack up 2 on the ultimate, which is not a big deal. But the ultimate cost became much higher, moving up to 1650 from 1000. Considering her divinity generator, this solidifies her role in a fight with multiple enemies rather than single. For these changes, her score will still improve by 2 points. Her Awakening 1 adds Curse at a 50% chance to her ultimate effect, 1 out of 2 points. Her Awakening 3 is massive. It allows her passive to crit after 10 enemies are defeated. This can amplify her passive's damage by up to about 4 times, although this is a niche ability. 1.5 out of 2 points. Her Awakening 5 is amazing for content with many enemies, such as the planned endless waves for world boss preparation. I think it's a really cool, fun effect, and powerful. 2 out of 2 points. Lamashtu gets a total of 24 out of 36. Now on to Loki. Poor Loki didn't get any changes to his kit other than an increase to his divinity cost. His Awakening 1 increases Loki's turn meter by 20% for each target that resists sleep. Hard to see a use for this, half a point out of 2. His Awakening 3 adds speed down on the target when sleep expires or is removed. This can be quite good in the first case. 1.5 out of 2 points. His Awakening 5 steals a buff or increases the duration of a random buff by 1 turn. It probably has niche uses. 1 out of 2 points. Loki gets a total score of 17.5 out of 36. Next we have Metztli, whose kit has stayed exactly the same. Her Awakening 1 improves her ultimate by adding Vanish for 2 turns on all allies except this hero. Good for general protection. 1.5 out of 2 points. The Awakening 3 adds Res up 2 to her core as well as makes it so that all of her buffs can't be removed. Fairly good, but seems niche. 1 out of 2 points. Her Awakening 5 doesn't really make sense to me as it wants to spread one random buff from Metztli to all allies. But she doesn't steal any buffs, and all of her buffs are already AoE and therefore won't be able to be spread to allies since they'll already have the buff. Half a point out of 2. Metztli gets a total of 20.5 out of 36. Morgan Le Fay's kit has remained exactly the same, although I think I was slightly too harsh on her in the last video and think she may have some potential when paired with other specific legendary heroes. For this, I'll give her 1 extra point. She is missing her Awakening 1 and 3 unfortunately, so I'll be generous and give them each 1.5 out of 2 points. Her Awakening 5 increases this hero's accuracy by 10 each time an enemy's debuff activates. This stacks up to 200 accuracy. This will probably stack up quite quickly. It's unlikely to help land debuffs as you should already have built her with the required accuracy. It will also not increase Morgan's damage all that much, maybe up to 25%. I'll give it 1 out of 2 points. Morgan gets a total of 21 out of 36 points. Next, we have Mulan, whose kit has also stayed the same as well. Her Awakening 1 ignores 30% resistance when she is under Vanish. Not particularly impactful. 1 out of 2. Her Awakening 3 has not been completed, so she gets the benefit of the doubt 1.5 out of 2. Her Awakening 5 is very good. When this hero is under Vanish and would be defeated, prevents this hero's death and she gets an extra turn. 2 out of 2 points. Mulan gets a total score of 23 out of 36. Pazuzu had a good change to his kit. He now places despair on his core to the target if they are aligned with order. It seems like it might be single target, but could also mean all order targets. It's hard to know for sure. For this change, his score improves by 2 points. His Awakening 1 sounds like it also is a single target and it's conditional. 1 out of 2 points. His Awakening 3 increases accuracy by 5 up to 100 every time an enemy receives a buff. I don't see a good use case for this. Half a point out of 2. His Awakening 5 is okay. It makes his ultimate have 40% chance per target at max level to steal 20% of their turn meter. 1 out of 2 points. Pazuzu gets a total of 19 out of 36 points. Next we have Perun, whose kit has remained stable. His Awakening 1 also places initiative down 2 for 2 turns on his basic. This should be good for boss battles. 1.5 out of 2 points. His Awakening 3 stuns enemies that have had their turn meter reduced to 0. This could have some niche use cases. 1 out of 2 points. His Awakening 5 can be quite powerful, doubling his turn meter reduction from 20% to 40% if the enemy has over 50% turn meter. 1.5 out of 2. Perun gets a total of 21.5 out of 36 points. The next one is quite a sad one. Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl received a huge nerf and is now no longer my most wanted hero from the minigame. He is definitely outside my top 5 now. The biggest change was his ultimate, where both attack up 2 and sharpen 2 were removed and replaced with initiative up 2. His speed aura was also changed. It now is only active in dungeons and not all battles, but it has been increased slightly from 21% to 24%. Overall, another downgrade. His divinity generator was also changed, which is good for early game but probably worse late game. With all this considered, I've reduced his score by 5 points. Quetzalcoatl's Awakening 1 is great. It increases all ally speed by 10 up to a total of 30 each time the core is used. 2 out of 2 points. His Awakening 3 makes his Petrify always land. This is also very strong, but it won't work on bosses. 1.5 out of 2 points. His Awakening 5 causes his passive to now revive all enemies instead of 1. This is also good. 1.5 out of 2 points. Quetzalcoatl gets a total of 27 out of 36. Next we have Ra, who had 2 changes to his kit. The first change, which makes no difference, was his ultimate accuracy multiplier decreasing from 95% down to 75%. The accuracy bonus is way too low to impact his damage in any real way, although his ultimate cost has increased significantly from 1000 to 1450. For this reason, I must decrease his previous score by 1 point. His Awakening 1 increases his crit damage by 3% for each Blaze 2 placed, stacking up to 45%. I think this is great value for Awakening 1, 2 out of 2 points. His Awakening 3 causes his ultimate to increase the duration of Blaze by 1 turn on all enemies when the ultimate defeats an enemy. This is okay, but it's only required once you have his Awakening 5 unlocked. 1 out of 2 points. His Awakening 5 synergizes very well with his kit by causing any of his attacks to have a 50% chance of activating Blaze. 2 out of 2 points. Ra gets a total of 27 out of 36. Now on to Raijin, who had a lot of information revealed about his kit. His attack multiplier is good on the ultimate and okay on the core, but it is very high on his basic, which is exciting to see. His divinity cost has increased from 1000 to 1550, with a fairly weak divinity generator. Although, now when I look at these initial divinity costs set at 0 and 1000, it becomes clear that they were just placeholders. Due to this new information on Raijin, I would increase his score by 2 points. His Awakening 1 increases his ultimate's chance to strong hit targets under Hex. This is fairly strong, 1.5 out of 2. His Awakening 3 essentially makes his defense down 2 and Hex 2 debuff durations 3 turns. This is very good as he has a 4 turn cooldown on his core. 2 out of 2 points. Raijin's Awakening 5 no longer limits his passive's triggers, greatly increasing potential damage output, 2 out of 2 points. Raijin gets a score of 26.5 out of 36. Next we have Shamash, who had a small nerf to his ultimate. It now revives the ally with half the amount of HP and slightly less turn meter. For this, I'm reducing his score by half a point. His Awakening 1 removes the need for accuracy on this hero, 1.5 out of 2 points. His passive adds block debuffs to allies who join him in attacks. This can be hard to make work when the buff only lasts one turn, 1 out of 2 points. His Awakening 5 gives the enemy who is revived by his ultimate full divinity. This has potential to help significantly, 1.5 out of 2 points. Shamash gets a total of 27 out of 36 points. Sun Wukong has had 2 nerfs to his kit. He no longer self-buffs on his core, which the core also scales off having buffs, and his passive now only applies Immortal for 1 turn instead of 2. For this, I have decreased his score by 2. His Awakening 1 causes him to always join attack with Tian heroes. This is very powerful for an Awakening 1, 2 out of 2 points. His Awakening 3 essentially gives Wukong the ability to mirror 1 buff per core use, 1 out of 2 points. The Awakening 5 is okay. It helps spread some of his ultimate damage when against multiple enemies and increases its damage by a little under 30% against single targets, 1 out of 2 points. Sun Wukong gets a total score of 26.5 out of 36. Next we have Svarog, who had some changes to his attack multipliers, which is fairly significant. He has the potential to do some damage himself now. For this reason, plus I was slightly too harsh on him in the first place, I'll give him 1 extra point. His Awakening 1 is pretty lackluster damage boosting for Svarog, 1 out of 2 points. His Awakening 3 is also pretty mediocre, increasing his shield value up to 30%, 1 out of 2 points. His Awakening 5 can have some decent use cases in many areas of the game, 1.5 out of 2. Svarog gets a total of 29 out of 36. Viviane had no changes to her kit. Her Awakening 1 places Sharpen 2 on the core. This is excellent, exactly what I would want to see on her, 2 out of 2 points. Her Awakening 3 is going to be very good for Clan Boss, although I really think it should be changed to reducing divinity cost by 30, stacking up to 10 times. 1.5 out of 2 points. Her Awakening 5 can increase damage output by a decent amount. I'll give it 1.5 out of 2 points. Viviane gets a total of 30 out of 36. Finally, we have Wang, whose kit unfortunately has not changed. His Awakening 1 adds 35% chance to place sleep on targets who have speed down on them. Not an easy setup and quite unreliable, 1 out of 2 points. His Awakening 3 is great. It reduces the damage enemies inflict by 5% up to 25% for each debuff on them, 2 out of 2 points. His Awakening 5 improves his core by giving it a conditional chance to place an additional random debuff. Once again, this is hard to use and it's unpredictable, 1 out of 2 points. Wang gets a total of 17.5 out of 36. Here is the tier list, when scoring based on how effective they are in each potential area of the game with their awakenings. How would you rank any of these heroes differently using this criteria? Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.